Good evening from Caracas. For Telesur, I'm Cody Weddle in Caracas. We begin tonight in Peru. That's where the Climate Change Summit is underway in the capital of Lima. Many of the developing nations in the G77 plus China group say that the proposals will likely be weighted in favor of the developed nations. They follow that up by saying that it should be the wealthier nations bearing much of the responsibility due to their historical and current pollution levels and their strong economic development at the expense of poor nations.
This international cooperation should see developed countries doing substantially more than what they are doing or planning to do in cutting their emissions, cooperate more with developing countries through providing more financial resources, improving access to climate knowledge and technology, helping build skills and capacity, and addressing the adverse social and economic consequences of their response measures, so that developing countries would be able to do more in terms of adaptation, mitigation, and sustainable development.
Telesur Raul Mora is at the summit. He has more on what agreements might be reached.
The second day of the COP20 has started today with the inauguration of the Indigenous Peoples Pavilion by indigenous leaders and the president of the COP20, Purgal Vidal, who is also the Minister of the Environment of Peru. A report was released earlier noting that in order to prevent a 2-degree increase in temperature, we will have to have a 40% decrease in emissions by 2050 and eliminate it totally by the end of the century. Back to you.
Raul, now continuing with our coverage of Colombia's stalled peace talks. General Ruben Dario Alzate claims he was on a social mission when FARC guerrillas capture him. As our correspondent Charles Parkinson reports, he also says that President Juan Manuel Santos now wants to bury the story.
Yesterday afternoon, General Ruben Dario Alzate spoke publicly for the first time following his release by the FARC on Sunday. He spoke in order to try and explain what exactly he was doing on November 16th when he was captured by the guerrillas, having entered an area of high guerrilla activity, dressed as a civilian with no security protection. He suggested that he was part of a social project in the western coastal region of Chocó where he was captured and had gone dressed as a civilian in order to try and win the trust of the local population, who he said don't have confidence in the military. He then offered his resignation, which President Juan Manuel Santos subsequently accepted. Now, Santos has come out and said that he accepts the story that Alzate has given, and as far as he's concerned, that's the end of the matter. However, in the Colombian media today, many journalists are highlighting the holes that exist in his story, but sadly, we're probably never going to hear the full truth. Charles Parkinson in Bogota, Colombia.
Thanks to Charles. Now to Mexico, where anger and frustration at the government of President only continues. In the 2 months since the disappearance of the Ayotzinapa students, the president has yet to visit the region. Protesters today marched through the main square of Mexico City. They waved banners and placards. Some of the protesters attacked a Starbucks coffee shop. The protest was organized by students and unionists and was joined by indigenous performers in solidarity with the missing 43 students. And now to Ukraine. That's where the deputy prime minister of the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic says that pro-Russian separatists and Ukrainian authorities have agreed to a ceasefire at the Donetsk airport. Andrei Pergin says fighting would stop at the airport in coming days. The airport has been reduced to ruins by months of fighting between the rebels and government forces for its control.
Well, today's outcome is that we agreed from 6 o'clock in the evening not to shoot at the airport, and we in principle came close to the signing of transitional documents fulfilling the Minsk Memorandum and providing its practical implementation.
Staying in the region, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says Western sanctions have not halted Russia's support for separatists in Ukraine. He also claims that the sanctions have damaged the Russian economy.
That Russia has the opportunity to make a very different choice. And we are prepared, as others are prepared, to sit down, to negotiate, work through reasonable ways in which all the parties could agree to very specific steps that could be taken in order to move in the different direction that is available.
And in Turkey, dozens of Kurdish Peshmerga fighters have left for the Syrian border town of Kobani to help battle Islamic State insurgents. Kurdish militia have been holding off Islamic State fighters for more than 2 months in Kobani. Neither side has gained a decisive advantage despite U.S.-led airstrikes meant to push back the insurgents. Ending on a historical note tonight, scientists have found that there may have been a break in the British royal line. They made the discovery after finding the body of King Richard III 2 years ago. Analysis shows that the DNA does not match the male side. Scientists conclude that infidelity is the most likely explanation, creating more questions about the royal bloodline. More on those stories and others at our website, telesurtv.net/English. For Telesur English, I'm Cody Weddle. We'll see you in the morning.